Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Canadian-based jazz pianist and composer James McGowan on the 2023 CD Reaching Him. This new project is the first half of an extended story told through music, spoken word, program notes, and visual art. It depicts a protagonist journey from struggles of isolation, low self-worth, social anxiety, addiction, and loss to finding peace, acceptance, belonging, and a sense of community. Using powerful musical expression, tonal interconnections, reoccurring themes, and several pervasive musical motifs, this 16-movement concept album conveys deep feelings and extra musical meaning. We cover this album, COVID, and so much more. Enjoy.
Great to catch back up with you. Thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today.
My pleasure.
So, before we get into this project, which just seems like kind of it's a very visual and almost seems like a cathartic kind of project, I want to know how you did through COVID. How did you survive that time period, and how has it changed the way that you approach things now that, you know, the world's waking up and we're entering this post-pandemic era of our existence?
Yeah, absolutely critical question. I think we're all artists are grappling with that. I truly believe that the COVID period, regardless of how anyone specifically, handled it, did change how we do our art. Like, we now know that, we can do a gig, we can do a show, but that's not guaranteed anymore. I think the art, what it did show though, is that, music, the art, is the essential part of our life, our existence. So how do and I think a lot of people did the same sort of thing. We question what we're doing. And in my own craft, I said, well, we're in a digital world. This is the only way to really comfortably exist. But despite the fact that, albums these days don't generate, a lot of money. Sometimes we lose money on these projects, but it is the way to communicate, and people do want to hear music. People do want to hear art that represents the time and the existence and who we are in the moment. And that's where I'm coming at it. I want to create something. I want to create something that can be performed and critically engage with our audiences, but really can reach people that represents what, some of us or all of us are going through.
So have you played any live shows recently?
I played a number of shows, so not with the group that's on this album, because, this is a larger project that was comprised of a whole bunch of busy people. But I am playing a fair bit, in addition to my work, in education. There's a resurgence of people wanting to go see now. We're starting to get more comfortable getting out, and it's been good that way. I do want to get some of my newer things with the larger ensemble out there, and we've got we got a show sort of planned, but that's the thing. Like, you got to go with the flow and respond to the situation you're in, and I'm trying to play as much as I can because that's what people want to hear. That's what I want to be doing.
Well, and I guess my question to you is, how does the crowd feel? How does the crowd feel now prior to, the pandemic beginning? Is there a level of energy that's different?
That's a great question. I don't know if other people have the same experiences, but I find that the audiences that I've had have been, for the most part, happy to be there. Like, maybe that's a trite way of saying that. There are some people who are genuinely grateful that live music has returned. There's other people who have sort of, haven't come back or come back sporadically. There isn't a great difference that I've noticed, but I think there are some people that I've engaged with them, and I personally feel the same way. When you go out to a concert, you can't take it for granted, and there's more of a gratitude of connecting with the audience and the audience connecting with the artist. And some artists take advantage of that in a positive way by saying, here's my audience. I don't want to take you for granted, and let's create a relationship. And that to me is a positive way of where music is currently. And I've experienced some of that. I think we can always do better as an audience in getting people out there. But I do think there's a great awareness that we can't take it for granted.
So as you mentioned on this latest album, Reaching In, it's a large cast of musicians. But I'm curious, with this kind of undertaking from a visual standpoint and an audio standpoint, talk to me a little bit about how you conceived this idea and how you artistically followed through on it.
So I'm going to start by saying, as a jazz musician, I don't consider myself, strictly in any kind of traditional vein at all. Like, I first of all, I believe in the a fusion of different musical ideas, but also music as connecting stylistically and finding points of intersection with other arts. So I believe in finding inter-arts expression as the way to go, where my desire to create is going. As a music specialist, I feel the need to collaborate and partner with those who are specialists in other areas. So this particular project, Reaching In, is part of would turn out to be a very large plan of 2 albums, and this is the first album, where I'm telling a story. So there's the poetry side of things, and there's just 3 tracks on each of the 2 albums that are going to be have this spoken word mixed with this jazz classical fusion type of background. And then I wanted the visual element, as you're mentioning, and that's where earlier on I connected with this visual artist, this painter in Ottawa, where I live, Canada, and she does a lot of really good emotional type of very visual, lots of color, artistic work, and she loves jazz and gets it too. So I commissioned her to paint a painting based upon the narrative of this album, and she did a great job. And the painting is out there with the music, and it really captures a lot of the ideas, and it actually influences some of the music in return. It's a very mutually productive relationship. And then when I do live music, we've done 2 shows with this music already. We're doing another show coming up in September, take some planning, that involves live painting, that involves also some movement and dance, and of course there's the spoken word part of it. So it'll be very immersive, very very multimedia without the digital form of engagement with an audience. That's where this project is going, to create as much of an immersive experience as possible for an audience.
And that's rather unique, in the world of music. But I've noticed lately in the world of jazz, a lot of people are really going out of their way to kind of fuse together this art and the message, whether it's spoken or music. Would this have happened prior to the pandemic? Do you think there was a level of this that kind of has been brought to life because we've changed so much as a people? I mean, there's been so many revelations and so many things that have gone into the way that we've evolved, I think, and changed over this time.
So the short answer is yes, but I'm going to definitely expand on that by saying, I was headed in this direction already, but man, this is just a jump start. We had time to think. I remember I was talking to you with my last album right at the start of the pandemic, and we had a wonderful conversation about how this is affecting us, and that album was created without pandemic concerns until the very last part of it, which was the mixing and mastering. But this album was conceived right around that time, so there was it was very compositional. It was a very private exercise, whereas the previous jazz was really created more collectively. Well, this was more of a compositional side. So I tapped into my composition background, in the classical side of things. But I do think that jazz today isn't defined by a very limited sense of what jazz is. It doesn't have to always just swing. It doesn't have to always have this. I think jazz, in its most progressive, in its most contemporary sense, is very inclusive in a very broad field, and that's what I love about jazz personally. So this project, getting back to your question, absolutely comes from the time to develop these ideas that by not going out and playing, by not going out and doing work outside the home, actually allowed me to do. And a lot of it did reflecting on the sense of isolation, of conflict, of dealing with our own issues, whether they be any kind of internal crisis, really, and then how to channel that. And I think I've seen a lot of people who do this. Like, how do we dress this through our art? And that's where I was going with this. I really think that it does come about from this whole process that we've all experienced.
So what are you ultimately hoping the listener gets from this project overall, like the entirety of it? What are you hoping?
First of all, I think with this particular project, I go back to the time when people listened to albums. We know that lots of people do playlists on Spotify or whatever, and that's not to put that down in any way. But I personally value listening to an album because there's a sense of design, by many artists who put together an album historically, and concept albums in any genre. To me, it represents the epitome of what an album can do. It's like more than a novel. It's like a full embracing experience, and that's where a lot of the inspiration is to put together this two part, especially this album, Reaching In, which I'm sharing. It is a story. It's a narrative. It's a concept album, and that's pretty critical for me. And what I like to get a listener to do is take the time to listen to a track. Absolutely in experience, but all the tracks on the album are intentionally different stylistically, but so incredibly connected motivically and thematically. There's all these intersections and interconnections that allow a really rich experience by having the music itself tell the story. The music itself with its themes and its motifs have meaning. So my hope is that a listener will take the time to listen to the album, whether there's three parts to it, so the first part, the second part, third part, or all 16 tracks, and really experience what the sounds are saying to them and how the sounds link into the few pieces that have the actual narrative in the spoken word, and have how that relates to their own journeys and their own experiences. So really and truly my hope is that people take the time to listen to music to see what it means to them. It's the best way to experience this, and everyone who I've talked to who takes that time, they say, wow, it's a deep listening type of album.
So the other part of this is that you have all of these musicians together. How did you all come together for a synergy that worked, that made this album sound and come out sonically the way that you wanted it to? Yeah,
absolutely. So the string quartet, which is a fundamental part of this album, is a group of people. They're four family members. They're four siblings, two sisters and two brothers, and they also have a colleague who comes in and plays with them. But this group is who I met a creative relationship and we developed a rapport. But everyone else on the album I already knew really well and played with in many contexts. So the core rhythm section is what we call my Motosaurus, which is the name of my previous and still existing fusion band. So that quartet plus the string quartet plus four horns plus a couple others who jumped in. I knew these people individually. I knew what they could do as a group in subgroups. So writing to them was really about, like, I know what they're going to do. I know their sound. I know what, they can do improvisatory. So putting together the ensemble was less of an orchestral process, like writing generically for people you don't know, and really about knowing these people as human beings and great artists. And I've worked with these people before, and I just know that two rehearsals with limited time necessarily will get the job done, because they're going to take the time to understand what I'm doing. Anyway, long story short, I knew these people. I knew it was going to work. I wrote for them, and I got it right. And we tweaked it as we went along, of course, with their input. But I'm really happy with how it turned out working with these great artists.
You have this, perspective, and there's a lot of musicians out there that do. You're not only are you a practitioner, recording artist, live performer, but you also educate as well. There was a fear, I think, over this last 3 years that a lot of people were moving out of big cities and maybe students wouldn't want to get into jazz. But my sense from my end of the microphone is that it's just as strong, if not stronger, than it's ever been. What's your perspective? How are you seeing the younger, or even the mincing of the older generation coming together to make this community? Do you see it as strong now?
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't have 2 hours to hear me pontificate on this, but man, I really agree with you. Where my own particular university, where I'm a faculty member, I'm also one of the directors of our jazz camp, which is a program for middle to high school students, for universities and some adults, but really focusing on a group that would historically be, really getting into jazz, and yet some of these people had their music programs really suffer, that some schools just stopped music entirely, or if they had music, they didn't allow wind players to play and all that stuff. And I don't want to get into whether that was the right thing or wrong thing, but the real challenge now is we have a whole bunch of people who don't know the joy of music making. So myself, my colleagues and I have been working through middle school programs, outreach programs, high school students, and trying to get them to re-experience it. I ran a program on improvisation a couple months ago, and I had 20 kids, mostly grade 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15-ish. And they're seeing their eyes open up, and just their whole body language came about with this new positivity. And I see this happening wherever people get this taste of music, and specifically jazz, because of its wonderful way of linking other people together and creating community. It's there, it's coming back. As long as you don't see jazz as being like an immutable fixed object from the past, but a currently living and breathing musical, tradition and practice of the day, then we're going to get our people. We're running a jazz camp next week at my university, at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada, and we our enrollments went through the roof. We had to cut it off, and we can't do more than this number of people. So, the interest is there. We just need to convince some of the parents to say, yes, this is a viable field. But the kids, when they get the opportunity, love it. And it's meaningful to them. That's what's important.
So talk to me a little bit about what's next for you. I know you want to present this music reaching in. You kind of touched on that early on. What are your plans as we kind of look forward, and how can people find out about any live shows that might be coming up for you?
Yeah, so I use social media. I'm primarily a Facebook guy, as my kids say, because I'm an old guy. I put stuff up in there. My website, jamesmcgowan.ca, not com.ca, is where I put a lot of that information as well. So the big thing that's going to focus my energies is to put together a few of these very multimedia type presentations for the current album, but also in creating music for the next album. The next album, reaching out, at this point in time, is about half already recorded in rough, so we need to do some more editing on what we've already done. We did some of that while recording the first album, which reaching in, the continuation reaching out. We'll have some music that I'm just finishing now. We're going to be performing over the summer and into the fall and recording in different forms. So my main focus from a taking my time will be putting together this next album, where I'm the composer, I'm performer, I'm the organizer of the musicians, and I'm producing the album with a wonderful sound engineer and then a wonderful mastering engineer. So that's really my focus for next year. Beyond that, we'll see. I might want to take a little bit of a break, but I love the energy that's and the momentum that I have with this current project. I'll keep doing some smaller work, so smaller like trios and quartets, but my passion right now is getting this story out there.
The one thing I think we figured out over this time period, the last 3 years, was there's more ideal places to pick up music. Is Bandcamp the best place to pick up, reach in?
So I have some CDs, but Bandcamp has been a great in terms of corporate entities. They've been more supportive of musicians than many others. So I do strongly support Bandcamp. I have a great page set up there. I encourage people to take a look. It's got some of my other albums on there, and that's you can check out James McGowan Ensemble on Bandcamp. And thanks for pointing that out.
James, it's great to catch back up with you. Thank you for being candid and opening up about this project and this world that we're entering back into, where things are opening up. I appreciate it.
Thank you for doing what you're doing and making sure that artists have a voice. And that's what we all want to hear. We want to create community that way. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Canada, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to James for his second time on Neon Jazz and for his time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, you can find Neon Jazz interviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.